Hey everyone! So recently I covered this, the Palm Pre. This was a very neat and unique and forward-thinking smartphone from 2009 that really was quite cool, but had a few too many issues to be the device that catapulted Palm back into the mainstream and be a true iPhone competitor. And so after the somewhat disappointing reception of the original Pre and a launch of some later models, Palm got acquired by HP on July 1st of 2011 for $1.2 billion. And soon after, they announced this, the Palm Pre 2. So was HP's first phone under the Palm brand able to bring it back into relevance, or was it just too little too late? Let's find out in my Palm Pre 2 retro review. Okay, so right off the bat, I want to mention that this is not actually the second Palm Pre. This is actually the third one. You see, in between these two, there was another model, the Pre Plus. So yeah, in early 2010, they released the Palm Pre Plus and Palm Pixie Plus. The Pixie Plus is the one I'm showing here. The Pre Plus basically looked like the original Pre. I'll show an image on screen. But there are a few key differences, such as it no longer had this home button, rather just had the completely capacitive gesture area, like on the Pre 2 here. And on top of that, it had a slightly improved keyboard and sliding mechanism, I believe. So it was a pretty minor hardware upgrade from the outside, but there were a couple of big changes on the inside. First and foremost, it had double the RAM at 512 megabytes. So this meant that webOS would operate more smoothly and snappily. And then the other big improvement inside was the doubling of storage from 8 gigabytes to 16 gigs of internal storage. Now, it still remained non-expandable, so you're stuck with the 16 gigs and you can never change that. Same applies for the Pre 2. But it was a nice sort of S model to the Pre. Unfortunately, the Pre 2 was basically an S model to the Pre Plus. But if you look at these from most angles, I mean, from the back here, they look like the same phone. And unfortunately, that holds true for a lot of areas. And while it's still a very nice design, by the time 2011 was rolling around, because while this was announced in late 2010, it didn't make it to store shelves in the US until February, I believe, of 2011. And in 2011, you're probably going to want a bigger screen. This is smaller than even the screen of the original iPhone, which was 3.5 inches. I believe this is 3.1. So yeah, it was a very nice screen. And the Pre 2 actually had the advantage of going away from the plastic of the Pre and the Pre Plus to an actual glass screen and then less rounded corners to accommodate the glass panel. So this was very nice because, you know, it felt more premium, less prone to scratches. I mean, this has a couple of scratches, but they're nowhere near as bad as the ones on the plastic screen on my original Pre here. But anyway, as you can see, the Pre 2 and the original Pre do look very, very similar from the outside. And considering the Pre was released in 2009 and this is 2011, I mean, it's just not a great look to have, you know, your third generation sort of look like your first one from most angles. However, the Pre 2 did have a point for its existence. Actually, several. Not only did it have a better camera, now at 5 megapixels, but it also had a much better processor, with a clock speed of 1 gigahertz as opposed to the maybe 500 some megahertz of the previous models, if I remember correctly. So yeah, anyway, it definitely was an improvement in that regard too. And the other big thing is this ran webOS 2.0, and HP broke the promise that the earlier models would get webOS 2.0. Spoiler, they didn't. And yeah, that was not great. A lot of people were probably pretty mad about that. But yeah, I mean, the Pre 2 definitely had a point for its existence. It was a much better phone than the original Pre, and a nice little upgrade over the Pre Plus. The problem is, it just was, in my opinion, too little too late, even with the new webOS software. But by and far one of the worst things is if you look at any review from the time on this Pre 2, you'll notice that they all mention the Pre 3, and that's because HP had already announced, by the time this was hitting store shelves, that the Pre 3 would be coming very soon and have better specs, newer design, bigger screen, and would just be better in basically every way imaginable. So that didn't help. I mean, in a way, it kind of was, a victim of the Osborne effect in that regard. But yeah, it was very, very unfortunate because that's just making it even harder to sell this in because, hey, HP's got a new model in the works that's going to be 10 times better anyway. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that these were not common phones at all. Just because it wasn't the most successful doesn't mean it's a bad phone. In fact, this is actually a very good phone. Let's see how the Pre 2 does without considering kind of the circumstances it was released in. And when you look at it that way, it's actually one of the best webOS devices you can actually get. So let's dive in. So let's start by taking a bit of a deeper dive into the design of this phone. So you'll notice that the keyboard is slightly different looking than the original Pre, and as I mentioned before, I feel like there were some slight improvements to the keyboard and hinge. And yeah, I mean, the keyboard is better than it was in the original Pre, but it's still not great. And it's still definitely, I still definitely prefer the keyboard on the Pixie Plus that I have here. So yeah, that's one thing, but it is an improvement, so I'm glad it's there. But I will say, the design isn't super exciting on this. The camera, as you can see, did get a slight improvement, as I mentioned before. It's still not a great camera, and it's still not something that, I'd really want to take around with me, but it is an improvement over the original Pre as far as I can tell. And I do think that that's a good thing, because 3 megapixels is kind of rough. But anyway, what's really the main highlight of this device is the new software, webOS 2.0. Now, webOS 1.x was definitely pretty forward-thinking and intuitive, but webOS 2.x really takes it to a new level. This is running the latest supported version, which is 2.2.4, and as you can see, a lot has changed. Like the launcher, for example. Before, you just had 3 pages, you couldn't rearrange them, and they didn't even have titles or anything. They were just kind of 3 different pages that you could move icons around to, and that was it. But now webOS actually lets you create more pages and reorder them and give them titles. So it's kind of like a neat folder system. Overall, it's much more intuitive. The launcher was definitely one of the more disappointing parts of earlier versions of webOS, so I'm glad that they were able to improve it. And one area where they really improved also was universal search. Before, you could do a universal search by just typing, and it worked, but it wasn't as intuitive as the new universal search, known as just type. And yeah, you just type, and if I want to open up like gesture tutorial here, I just have to type in G, and then I can launch it right from there. Similar to Apple's Spotlight, it's pretty nifty. I mean, it's not anything super amazing by today's standards, but it's pretty cool back then. And the final feature I'm going to cover in webOS 2.0 was kind of an improvement on the existing cards interface. Now, you might remember how I kind of went over this in the last video. And basically, yeah, it's just like modern cards interfaces we use today. You could open up apps like Clock here and Memos, and then just seamlessly switch between them, like so. And you could even use this gesture here to swipe between them and whatnot. But what's really cool about them now is webOS 2.0 introduced the ability to stack them in this feature called Stacks. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, if you want to group your Memos and Clock together, then there you go. You just can swap over and just swipe through them. Works pretty well, but here's the thing. It's even somewhat automated. So if I go to the GitHub page for my little Facebook app, Prebook, you can see it created a stack because I opened it from the About page in the app, and so then it just opens a new browser instance in that stack, and you can just kind of categorize them like that. And then you can just swipe them away as you please, and then create a new stack if you want. I mean, it's really, really cool, and it was kind of the main feature of this version of webOS, though there were a lot of new things here, so, that is debatable. So, yeah, webOS 2.0 was very cool, and I feel like this is a very good device to experience it on, because it runs it well. I mean, this is a very good processor for the time, it runs webOS well, and this one right here is running the most recent version of webOS for phones, 2.2.4. And so, I mean, this really gives you kind of the final, most refined webOS experience I think that this could be a really cool device to add to your collection if you want to get into webOS, or if you have, like, say, an original pre, and you just want to, get a bit of a nicer experience and see what's new in webOS 2.0. Unfortunately, back in its day, it just was a bit too little, too late. And with the promise of the Pre 3, it ultimately never really was the success that maybe we'd wished it had been. But still, I'm glad that it was released, and I'm really glad to have this one in my collection. And massive thanks to all of you who watched and liked my Palm Pre video. I really appreciate it. Super cool to see how other people are interested in these old phones. And yeah, thanks for watching, and goodbye.